Perfect. Okay, so today, as part of Olivia's English 12 challenge, we're going to discuss a research-based piece of writing on autism and girls. And this is going to meet one of the competencies based on, quote, is competency number 22, respectfully exchange ideas and viewpoints from diverse perspectives to build shared understanding and extend thinking. So that's what we're going to do. We all read the article. We all created our reader response notes. And I don't know, whoever wants to start off.
Olivia, do you want to start?
Okay. So, yeah, I created a reader response a few weeks ago, I guess. Should I go through it?
Yeah. Yes, just some of your points. Like I thought you made a lot of what they call text to self references. Like you were referencing the text in relation to your own experience.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just added quotes and then responded to them. So the first one, the writer said that many women have think they are discriminated against when they're getting diagnosed with autism. And so I just responded to that because at first I thought, definitely I was diagnosed late because I was a girl, but then I realized I was homeschooled, so that might have factored into that as well.
Okay. Now, Wendy, what's been your experience with working with girls on the autism spectrum? Like when do they tend to get diagnosed?
I have not worked with that many girls that are on the spectrum. I do think there are more boys showing up in the regular school system. And the ones that I have worked with tend to be ones that are, like they mentioned the girl that had a lot of behaviors. And so then the teachers get alerted to those behaviors and then they say something, right? So I think that what the article, to me, my understanding was that she was saying, especially near the end, that they're undiagnosed because of that, because they'll be diagnosed with something else. And I see the same thing with ADD and ADHD. You know, if you've got a boy that's running all over the place, my son used to actually literally hang off the chandelier in our dining room. And so you see that hyperactivity, whereas if a girl's just sitting kind of off looking and thinking on her own and she's not an issue to anybody, then nobody really says anything. So it's the people that make noise I see that get diagnosed. Does that make sense to you? Is that how you see it too?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, well, I put in my notes, I have 20 years of classroom teaching experience, and I taught in an alternate school for, almost 10 years. And I've never, ever worked with a young woman who was diagnosed as being on the spectrum, whereas I've worked with scads of boys. So one of the things that I kind of pointed out in my notes is that if the criteria for evaluating autism is kind of based on male behavior, then of course it's going to miss the girls.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to pick up the next thread of your comments?
Sure. So there's a quote talking about how there are more difficulties for girls with autism, with like other mental illnesses. So I just talked about how I have like anxiety. So that's probably why.
Okay. I'm just going to grab your notes again.
I'm trying to find them. I found Dave's and I found mine.
You know, it's just called reader response framework.
Yeah, I'm looking in the, oh, I see.
Okay. Can you find it?
I got it now, yeah. That's because they were all in the Google Docs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now do you want to pick it up on the next point, Olivia? Because you had a really interesting take on the author.
Oh yeah, the last quote was something like about like they need, like, children of autism need to be supported so that they can be productive members of society. So I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm right, but like I just thought that the idea of having to make kids productive members of society harms children who are more disabled and can't be.
Yeah, so it's kind of judging them against this productivity scale or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, I might have misinterpreted what he said, though, I thought.
Well, okay, I think that's a good example of where there's an inherent bias from the perspective of the person who wrote the article.
Yeah.
Because if that's the goal, is to make people productive members of society, it's, I mean, it's, I guess you could say it's the, you know, kind of the Protestant work ethic, just that that's underlying that assumption.
I guess.
What do you think, Wendy?
Yeah, I'm just rereading what Olivia said here at the end, that mentality leads to further discrimination against those who can't meet that expectation. So I think where you put the bar is really important. And yeah. And then that also I think would go on to make people feel more anxious if they can't make the bar, right? Or it's not that they can't make it; they don't even want to make it.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. Now, my experience, like, you know, this article made me think back to when I was in the classroom, and like, there's sometimes a profile of what used to be. I don't hear the Asperger's word much anymore, but there used to be this label called high functioning Asperger's, right? Have you heard it, Olivia? Okay, so I can think of this one young man in particular who was labeled this, and he used it as a blank check to basically be off the wall, disruptive, and brilliant at the same time. And I probably fed into it a little bit because he was really intelligent. And I used to say, hey, you know, look, class is better when you show up. So please show up, right? So, but you know, the thing is with like, I don't know if that's a gender bias as well. Like the brilliant boy who is on, you know, the Asperger's spectrum, where like I never, like, you know, looking back, there was one young woman who I know was probably on the spectrum. And she ended up, she's a medieval scholar. And she teaches at, I think, Brown University, and you know, it's an Ivy League school. but she was particular, to say the least. And looking back, I mean, I think she probably went undiagnosed. Like she wasn't particularly motivated by grades per se. If it happened that what you were doing interested her, she would, give it her full effort, like a brilliant effort. So I'm not sure if that took us off course a little bit.
Well, I got a bit confused with that statement about where they were talking about higher functioning autism, a term that relates to higher IQs and greater ease adapting to the norms of the world we live in, and that the incidence is higher at 10-to-1 male to female. And I'm not sure what they're trying to say there or what evidence they have to support that. How do we say that in sort of layman's terms? Are they saying that there are 10-to-1 more males, maybe I'm reading this wrong, 10-to-1 more males out there that have higher IQs and can adapt better to the world than females? Or that's getting diagnosed 10-to-1 times more?
I think that the latter part is what's being.
Yeah. And why is that? Just because boys are louder? I mean, I don't know. What are we seeing here? Are we looking at, I didn't see any evidence to support that statement. So where is that coming from?
Yeah.
Did anybody else see evidence of that anywhere?
What, in the article?
Yeah.
Well,
I guess you have to look again.
Yeah.
Well, I think, okay, the other thing we have to kind of consider, okay, that with this article, it's not a scientific article. Mm-hmm. It's I don't know. I'm trying to remember, like where it appeared.
At Wired.
Okay, okay. Are you familiar with Wired? And how would you characterize Wired?
I don't know. They're a science magazine.
Okay. Are you, like, I know I've read things from Wired. Like Wendy, in your opinion, is it kind of a left-wing type thing? Is it kind of liberal?
It's probably middle of the road.
Okay. But it's not a scholarly journal. Is it? No, okay.
No, it's.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, okay, one of the things I reacted to in my notes was the kind of the male brain, female brain. I don't know if you saw those comments.
Yes.
But it's just kind of, I don't know if it overly simplifies. Boys, like boys being more left-brained, girls being more right-brained. And I've also heard that, talking about women's brains bridge the gap better from left and right brain than male brains. But it just seems like whenever you get into a discussion of that, I'm just going to look at my notes just so I know exactly what I said.
Right, gender-based conditioning you were talking about.
Yes. Yeah, so it talks about, men and women's brains being wired differently. Lots of research. Yeah, but how much of this is gender-based conditioning? Boys are typically not in touch with their feelings, etc. And often given a pass on that as well.
Olivia,
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask you, Olivia, sorry, if you felt comfortable in talking a little bit about your experience and if you encountered any of these kind of stereotypes or anything.
Well, I feel like maybe I was a little surprised that I was autistic. So I had that bias in myself. but the people who evaluated me were all women, so I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with it. I never felt like I was discriminated against.
Okay. Now, okay, I recently went, like I didn't go through the experience, but on behalf of a learner who was trying to get an autism diagnosis to provide her the support she needs, the educational psychologist and even the pediatrician, they wouldn't budge, and they wanted to, and what they came up with was a personality disorder.
Oh.
Which, like, the mother had tons of anecdotal evidence, and unfortunately, because the family moved a lot of the school records weren't available. But what they needed were basically even anecdotal comments from teachers that, you know, she was exhibiting aspects of behavior that would be considered, you know, on the autism spectrum. But then the other thing that was interesting, like the same article that we're talking about right now, it talked about girls being better at social camouflaging, which
I loved that term. I just thought that was really interesting. I do think that might be true in some ways, and I think that's conditioning, that we are conditioned from very, very young to kind of fit in the background, and yeah.
So in the case of this other young woman, and this is my theory after reading this article, is she's very good at social camouflaging. So she was camouflaging the kind of behaviors, the kind of repetitive behaviors that you often associate, like very fixated on certain things, wouldn't engage kids unless they wanted to talk about, she wanted to talk about. And so she just camouflaged really well. And so, which I guess, like as you mentioned, Wendy, is part of social conditioning.
But I think we all have to do that to a certain extent. It's kind of, social camouflaging to me is another aspect of disagreement. And so for personal experience, because I'm so introverted, I have to work really hard to get out and be like on stage, right? Mm-hmm. And so I have to put on this kind of it's like acting almost, right? But what I'd rather be doing is kind of sitting in the background in the camouflage in the trees. And so that there is, I think we all do it to an extent, and it just depends how much you need to do it and how you are comfortable with doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn it. We learn it quite young. Do you think you do some social camouflaging, Olivia?
Hard to say. Probably, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I've noticed, and this is totally anecdotal, but the boys that I know with autism, they're not afraid to be weird. But if I feel like I'm going to be weird, I just don't say anything, if that makes sense.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Do you think there's too much labeling of people, Olivia? Did we freeze?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Picking up.
Okay, I lost the thread of that question.
Oh, I was asking, do you think that there's too much? We tend to label people, and as soon as you kind of put that label on, um, then the kind of stereotype comes forward, which we see on TV, and in any kind of experience that we've had. So whatever that is, I just wonder if there's too much of that going on. And I, from, like I say, from personal experience, now my son, who is now almost 40, in those days, we didn't label people as much, for sure, as we do now. And he was to me just a brilliant kid who had some quirks. And yeah, so he would say outside is bad, sunshine is bad, people are bad, I don't want to go there. He'd like to stay in his cave. But before he was 16, he had recorded 6 of his own albums and taught himself to play piano, bass, and guitar. And he was just really focused on music and could do that. But when he would get up on the stage, he would sing his song and then back away from the microphone and not say anything because he couldn't do the banter kind of piece with it. So but he was never diagnosed because it didn't happen. And did it make a difference? He's still the same person, right? So I just wonder if sometimes, I know this article is arguing for that girls are underdiagnosed and so they can't get what they need. And what is it that you need? What do we need? Why do we need the diagnosis?
Well, I guess if a group of people need certain things, then they need that label to organize around. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I don't see a point to identify with it personally.
Yeah, it's almost a political thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Well, in the school system, without that kind of diagnosis, you don't get access to certain services, and that's where it does become political. Yeah, and it's interesting. Like I made a note in there about one of the schools there's a school that's referenced in the article that's just for kids with autism, which to me is another form of ghetto. And I know, Wendy, you've probably heard, read the articles by Shelley Moore. She's all the rage these days about inclusion.
Yes.
And she makes a really good point. I read one of her books recently where she's a member of the teachers union, but she took exception with the teachers union and their fight to basically limit the number of special needs kids in each classroom. And once again, she said, well, you've othered those kids by saying we'll only accept 3 in our classroom. Then you've made them the other already, rather than support, teachers to support those kids. And I agree with her 100%. To me, the idea of taking all these, special children with autism and putting them in a school without any contact with other kids, to me, I don't think that's beneficial at all. Mm-hmm. But I guess, Olivia, in your experience, have you ever, okay, I know a little bit because I recall you telling me a story that you briefly attended the Vernon Community School.
Yeah.
And
it was, yeah, I'd left.
Yeah, but no, I remember you were saying that they didn't do anything, and that was your biggest complaint.
Yeah.
But for you, was it kind of overwhelming being around the other kids?
It was a really loud environment, so very sort of disorganized.
Yeah, I know the teacher. He's a very free spirit. It was Murray, right?
Yeah.
and I can't remember his teaching partner's name. Was it? It was a woman. I remember that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a former shop or big art studio, and
No, it's in Fulton.
yeah, but I remember the room it's in it's got a super high ceiling. There's no carpeting. It's loud, like
Hmm.
noise just bounces off the walls.
Yeah.
But like, this was after you had your diagnosis, right?
Hmm.
And do they offer any specific support to you?
Well, they had an EA, but it was just like just not very well organized. So
Okay, and you think that's kind of what you think it's your own need for order that just said, no, this is not for me?
well, honestly, I don't know how well it worked for the regular kids either, but I guess that's for them to say.
Okay. Yeah, the only reason I brought it up is because just in a typical school, um, what happens with kids who are diagnosed with autism is they qualify for EA time,
Hmm.
but sometimes the EA is not a good fit with a particular learner. And oftentimes that EA has to split the time with multiple classrooms.
Yeah, my mom's an EA, so
Oh, what in the Vernon School District?
yeah, she used to work at St. James.
Okay,
Hmm.
all right. So yeah, you know the drill.
Yeah.
Now, do you, just out of curiosity, like, do you feel you're well served by
Um,
self-design?
yeah. I mean, I had a really chaotic beginning to high school, but yeah, that was pretty much just not knowing what to do. Because it's like, for homeschoolers, it's like, what are you going to do in high school, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because I know you were taking like the regular Moodle courses, right?
Hmm.
Okay, now, do you, does everyone want to maybe do one go around with like part of what we've done is shared our our understanding, but one of the other ideas is to kind of like how have we extended our thinking?
Um, okay.
Do you want to start us off?
Um, like looking at the document again.
Yeah, or
Or,
even just our discussion, so I mean, Wendy and I between us probably have over 50 years of teaching experience maybe. Um, I mean, you have experience living with, what was labeled as autism.
hmm.
Uh, like this, did this article give you any insights into your own
um,
experience?
well, it definitely made me think about how it and I did relate to some parts. Um,
Like, did it help you put your experience in a certain context?
yeah, yeah, I guess.
Okay. How about you, Wendy? Because we've got a few minutes left before the recording will stop.
I think that my the one thing I talked about a lot that I didn't write down was just where this article was coming from. That there was I do a lot of work with spirituality and with the mind, and I don't see any of that anywhere. And this came from a real that kind of like just the facts, ma'am, and it's physical, and this is how we deal with it, and we label you this, and we give you these drugs, and in that kind of thing. And so just kind of as an aside, you know, I am like, I've been working a lot with introversion because that's something I'm dealing with, but I also have major anxiety, and lately my anxiety has manifested like it did 2 years ago, where everything just came down at one time for me. And so it manifests in a variety of symptoms that follow each other. And so in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've gone through, like, my nervous system dialed up so that suddenly I could smell everything at 100% more. And then I could taste everything that I smelled. And so because I'm sensitive to chemicals, I was living out there in this, I was being bombarded by that. And then I get a really rare thing where my tongue feels like it's swollen. And when this happened 2 years ago, I thought I was having anaphylaxis. But I've come to the realization at this point that it's a sensation that I'm feeling. And so I've learned how to tell myself that's not happening. Your tongue is not swollen.
Now the meeting's going to end.
Okay.
So let's let it end, and then let's rejoin it because the recording will stop. Okay. So all right. So I'll stop the recording and end the meeting.
Okay.